a lot. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's virtual panel discussion on anticipatory action for monsoon preparedness, strengthening early response and resilience. We are delighted to have such a diverse group of stakeholders with us today. Technical experts, humanitarian actors, and community leaders coming together to explore one of the most pressing challenges of our time: how to shift from a reactive and how to shift from a reactive to a proactive approach in disaster risk management, particularly in the context of monsoon season. All of us have worked a lot on implementing the disaster risk reduction programs and also the humanitarian response programs. But today, what we are going to talk about is how anticipatory action is critical in bridging the gap between these two phases of the work that we have been doing. Monsoons in India bring much needed rain, but increasingly they also bring devastating floods, landslides, crop losses, and outbreaks of waterborne diseases. The humanitarian impact of such events disproportionately affects the most vulnerable, marginalized communities, women, children, persons with disabilities, and those living at high risk areas. As climate change accelerates the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, the need for early, predictive, and community centered response has never been more urgent. Anticipatory action is an emerging and transformative approach that enables early interventions before the disaster strikes. Based on the risk analysis, forecasting, and pre-agreed triggers, this approach allows us to preposition resources, activate cash or in-kind support, mobilize communities, and coordinate across institutions, saving lives, reducing losses, and preserving developmental gains. So our discussion today will aim to unpack a few aspects, which are the current priorities and challenges in embedding anticipatory action within India's disaster management and preparedness frameworks. Also, how can we strengthen early warning systems and translate them into early, localized, and impactful action? Also, how can we ensure that anticipatory measures are inclusive, gender responsive, and community owned? And most importantly, how can we bridge the policy and practice so that the anticipatory action becomes an integral part of monsoon preparedness, not a parallel effort? It has to be very embedded into the existing programs, existing plans that we implement. So throughout today's conversation, we hope to foster cross-sectoral learning, spotlight promising practices, and identify concrete pathways to scale up anticipatory action across states and systems. I will now open up this session to our esteemed panelists for the discussion without taking much time. So our first panelist is Mr. Prakash Thakur, who is the program coordinator at Germany. He will be talking about the anticipatory action and how has it proven effective in disaster preparedness, and what is the process for defining practical triggers and thresholds for monsoon-related actions. Over to you, Prakash.
Thanks, Imran. I hope I'm audible. Sorry, my internet is a bit fluctuating, so I will avoid using the camera.
Yeah, please.
Do you see my screen in the presentation mode?
Yes, we can. Not in the presentation mode, but it is still, you can make it in the presentation mode now. Yeah, now it is.
Okay, yeah. So, hi everyone. Once again, good morning. My name is Prakash Thakur. I work with ADA Germany, currently based in India, and I work from home. I support ADA Germany's global humanitarian and DRR portfolio. So, I will try to be very brief, and I will take you through the brief presentation on the basic overview on what is anticipatory action and how has it proven effective in disaster preparedness, and what is the process for defining practical triggers and threshold for monsoon related action. And I believe that this will definitely help also to set the tone for other speakers when they speak on key topics related to this. So defining the anticipatory action as per the G7 definition in 2022, anticipatory action is defined as acting ahead of predicted hazards to prevent or reduce acute humanitarian impacts before they fully unfold. So anticipatory action is also known as early action. is an activity or intervention taken before the actual disaster hits or before the actual emergency occurs, and is triggered by the early warning generated by most reliable and verified sources, such as from the government or the private system. So anticipatory action actually requires also pre-agreed plans that identify partners, the activities, reliable early warning information, and pre-agreed financing that gets released predictably and rapidly when an agreed trigger point is raised. The core characteristic of anticipatory action, it basically occurs before the shock. It has a protective intent. It has a pre-agreed risk-informed trigger, pre-agreed response mechanisms, and also it targets to reduce the humanitarian impact. So anticipatory action is a part of overall disaster preparedness and disaster risk management cycle that enables to act before the disaster strikes to minimize the impact, and also to provide support that enables to increase the coping capacity of the vulnerable community. So the rationale for anticipatory action, it helps in reduces the humanitarian impact because we act before the shock, and that helps increasing the coping capacity of the vulnerable community. It also helps to be more dignified because this helps the vulnerable population to reduce the impact, prevents in getting worse during actual shock, and also builds its capacity to recover from the shock due to early action. So anticipatory action plays a crucial role in maintaining the dignity of the vulnerable community by shifting on the approach from reactive aid to proactive protection and empowerment. So instead of waiting for a disaster to strike and then offering handouts or the assistance, anticipatory action involves in providing resources early, uh, like maybe the cash assistance, the information, or the required tools that increases the coping capacity. It also helps in protecting the development gains, means building resilience and helping in protecting the development gains in long run. Like disaster can, it wipe out the livelihood, especially for farmers, small business, and daily wage laborers. As an example, providing anticipatory action, let's say an example, the cash transfer or protecting crops, helps people avoid slipping back into the poverty or the previous situations. So it basically helps in minimizing the impact that ultimately links to protecting the development gains. To develop the anticipatory action protocol or the early action protocol, along with the linkages with the good early warning system, the four essential components that are basically the trigger, the anticipatory action, pre-arranged financing, and then monitoring and evaluation framework. So the trigger is a mechanism that translates the characteristic of a shock, such as like the flooding and its impact, into technical specifications. So these specifications are the basis for what the plan will preemptively respond to. The anticipatory action or early action is the one pre-agreed action, which has the best chance of supporting the population at risk to reduce the negative impacts of an extreme event. The pre-arranged finance based on the pre-agreed early action, the pre-arranged of the finance is essential to activate the early action protocol. It basically helps in providing assistance right on time. And the M&E framework, this basically allows a systemic review of the intervention and possible improvement afterwards, and also measuring the impact of the assistance that has been provided through the early action. Now, developing the trigger mechanisms. Briefly, we will see what is the process for defining practical triggers and threshold for monsoon-related actions. So as I said earlier, the trigger is a mechanism that translates the characteristics of the shock or its impact into a technical specification. For example, like 200 millimeter of rainfall in 24 hours may cause like flood, further impacting agriculture or any other things that may cause food insecurity. And the threshold is a pre-agreed level or the value that allows to trigger the activation of the early action protocol. So here, the value or the threshold is like, let's say, 200 millimeter of rainfall in 24 hours. So basically, the trigger helps us to tell when it is critical to act. And also, trigger helps to provide the decision makers the necessary information to know when and where early actions should take place and who and what is likely to be impacted. The trigger model is developed based on the detailed risk analysis of the natural hazards, including its impact assessment of past disaster events, and also analysis of exposure and vulnerability data. Often there is a discussion that happens also, like what kind of triggers that we follow, whether it should be a context specific or it could be broader or standardized. There's no specific theory to this, because the trigger could be very much context specific to very particular area, or also it could be standardized one by the local authorities or the stakeholders or the government agencies like AMD, considering the various aspects or the factors. The reason why I said sometimes the context specific is, let's say the water rise of 5 meters in one particular area may cause a flood, but that may not have a similar impact on the other areas which is slightly higher altitude or a different landscape within the same community or within the same area or within the same district. However, for certain context, for certain specific hazards, it is also possible to have a standardized triggers, like for the heat wave or maybe even for the cyclone or even for the drought. But flood, it is a bit tricky to define. However, it is the local authorities who can also decide based on certain parameter if the standardized triggers can be. How the triggers are developed. The process may vary between the organizations and the context. The following steps, actually, the steps that helps illustrate the process developing a trigger mechanisms, but also it is not the rocket science, or it's not the fixed pattern that everybody has to follow, as I said. So starting with conducting a risk analysis to understand the expected impact of hazard shock, select hazards and analyze the historical impact, conducting an exposure analysis to see who or what is likely to be impacted in line with the impact-based forecasting logic, and then also to identify the vulnerable indicators to help prioritize geographical area and the communities and the household most likely to be impacted by the selected hazard. And identify the vulnerable indicators to help the prioritize geographic areas, communities, the household most likely to be impacted by the selected hazards, and then create an inventory of the forecast to select the best suited forecast to trigger action based on the verification and the lead time. Lead time is also quite crucial, and then type and the reliability. And then defining the hazard magnitudes and calculate a return period. So the provision of funding for early action depends also on the significance of the humanitarian impact. So the return period is needed to provide the probability of an extreme event happening in a given year. The analysis and analyze the links between hazard, magnitude, and its impact in order to establish the expected impact and vulnerabilities. And lastly, create an intervention map by combining vulnerability and exposure information with forecast data to identify the targeted area for early action intervention. So in anticipatory action, the trigger is the degree of forecast loss and damage, which is basically maybe human livelihood, infrastructure, environment, etc. Or in other words, the degree of humanitarian impact of an extreme event that would initiate the action. So if more than a predetermined probability of certain amount of the loss or the damage is forecasted, then we act. Example, if the history of like the flood in one specific area as an average shows that 200 mm of continuous rain for, let's say, 3 days causes severe flood in that area. That means if there is an early warning, like from IMD, and of the heavy to very heavy rainfall in that target area between 150 to 200 millimeter for the next 1 week, then probably this trigger the activation of the early action protocol. So the work for the identification of triggers can be very technical, and also it requires expert resources, cooperation among the different stakeholders, the actors, institutions is necessary. Also keeping the community at the center, because lots of traditional knowledge and information also available there, including the key government agencies who generates the forecast and the early warning, and also the risk management experts and humanitarian development actors, among others. So development of multidisciplinary working group is suggested actually to include all relevant stakeholders to define and finalize the trigger mechanisms. So thank you so much. That's all I have from my insight on this presentation. I hope I am within the given time frame. Over to you, Imran, and I would be happy to answer questions later.
Thanks a lot, Prakash. We're keeping the question and answer session towards the end for all. Since humanitarian action is not new for us, but anticipatory action is a developing concept, and everybody is learning around this. Thank you for taking us through the details of what anticipatory action is, how it is important, and how critical are the defining the triggers to activate the anticipatory action and early action protocols. So we will now go to our next panelist, Mr. Damian Rick, who's Regional Anticipatory Action Specialist at UNFOW. Since he works at a regional level, we would want to understand some regional examples that illustrate the successful implementation of anticipatory action in other parts, and what lessons can India draw from the global experiences. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Damian. Over to you.
Thank you, Imran. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can.
All right, I will share my screen. I prepared only 3 slides, which I hope will be useful to illustrate my points. Sorry, I'm trying to find my slides. I think those are the one. I will go to the map. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So maybe before I start, I would like to add that I'm working with FAO regional office in Bangkok, but I'm also co-leading the regional technical working group on anticipatory action. And I will perhaps speak on behalf of the regional technical working group to give you an example of what's happening in the region. As you can see, we are doing a mapping of anticipatory action progress every year since 2 years. So we, last year in 2024, were able to assess the progress of anticipatory action in a total of 15 countries in the region. And it gives a very interesting perspective on what's happening. You mentioned that anticipatory action is, for humanitarian actors, relatively new. But the first pilot project started in the region back in 2015, with Bangladesh being one of the first countries piloting anticipatory action. Then I started to work on anticipatory action in the Philippines in 2017, and the concept has, I think, grown quite rapidly in the region. In these 15 countries, you can see that certain countries like the Philippines have now more than 30 anticipatory action frameworks for diversity of hazards. You have a country like Indonesia, where you have 17 plus anticipatory action framework, Bangladesh with 16 anticipatory action framework, Nepal with 15, and you have countries which are only starting recently, like Laos, Myanmar, Timor-Leste, Sri Lanka, where the number of frameworks is still relatively low. We have also highlighted in this slide the number of frameworks which have been used, which have been activated. I think it's equally important to note that we can put a lot of efforts in developing protocols, frameworks for anticipatory action, but it's more important perhaps to use them at the right time and to learn from this experience to see how we can improve this approach. So we have countries like Philippines, Bangladesh, Nepal, which I think have been a bit more advanced in the region, having already quite a fair number of frameworks activating. And I will give you a bit of detail in my next slide. What I wanted to show with this particular slide is that 40% of the 137 anticipatory action framework which have been identified are focusing on flood. So flood is certainly the first hazard that is being covered in the region with anticipatory action. The second hazard is drought. And it's a little bit logic that this hazard has gained interest in the past year, because there was a El Nino episode in 2018 at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. And the number of frameworks doubled between 2023 and 2024. Then typhoon is the next hazard covered by anticipatory action framework, and it's mostly in the Philippines, Bangladesh, Vietnam. I mean, logically, those countries who are exposed to this particular hazard. In the category other hazard, you will find cold wave, heat wave, epidemic, anything that can be predicted with a good accuracy can be covered with certain anticipatory actions. Between 2023 and 2024, we have a 35% increase in the number of framework in the region. And this year, in 2025, we expect to cover 20 countries with our mapping. I hope we will be able to capture maybe some of the, initial work done on anticipatory action in India. I mean, we will certainly capture the work of ADRA India on heat wave, but we want to hear more from India. As you can see in the map, we are missing information from your country. It's quite funny, but our office is based in Thailand, and we have no activities on anticipatory action in Thailand. And we hope there will be some activities happening in the coming years in Thailand as well. My last slide, I wanted to highlight a few points. You asked me for experience from the region in implementing anticipatory action, and I think it's the most critical element of the work we are doing on anticipatory action. We can put, as I mentioned, a lot of efforts in doing the planning, but using the plan effectively at the right time with, a proper impact on the population at risk is also quite challenging. We saw last year in 2024 around 30 anticipatory action framework activation. And I highlighted those 3 countries, Bangladesh, Nepal, Philippines, because those countries have reached that level of complexity where a number of activations are happening, sometimes not exactly in a coordinated way. Some frameworks are developed with different trigger methodologies for the same hazard. And we have this perhaps patchy picture where some activation for the same hazard, I will give the example of the Philippines for typhoon, have happened at different time of the year. So we had Start Network activating their Start Ready program in the beginning of the typhoon season for the first typhoon hitting the northern island of Luzon. Then a month after, FAO Philippines activated for the 3rd typhoon in the season. And then a month after, towards the end of November, we were 3 agencies activating at the same time, but not reaching that scaled level that we would want to see in those most advanced countries. Bangladesh is perhaps a better example because I think 3 or 4 agencies, including the Office of Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, SURF framework for flood anticipatory action, were triggered at the same time in July 2024. And I think with the activation of the SURF care, and I think there is another agency, Bangladesh Red Crescent, I think we reach a certain scale, and those flood anticipatory action frameworks activation were coordinated. So there is a strong need in the region for harmonizing anticipatory action practices. And we are now working with Philippines, Nepal, and Indonesia to align the methodologies across agencies to better plan the package of anticipatory assistance that can be provided by these different agencies who are sometimes working in the same areas. And we are trying to eliminate this fragmentation of efforts, which is sometimes counterproductive. It's, I guess, a necessary learning phase where different agencies are going to, test methods and learn how to do anticipatory action, which leads to this situation. But in order to perhaps have a better impact with our anticipatory action, there is no other way than coordinating our efforts with proper alignment of the triggers, rationalization of the anticipatory action package, and a better understanding of what are the source of financing that can be tapped if a trigger is reached to fuel our anticipatory action frameworks. This coordination is happening through national technical working group working on anticipatory action. This is perhaps one recommendation I can give to the Nepal community of practice. I might be wrong, but I understand that there is no focal agency working on this concept yet in India. We have technical working groups in 11 countries, and when there is no technical working group, we have one agency that can serve this link between the regional level and the national level for better coordination. I will, I think, stop here. I don't want to take too much of your time. You will find extremely good example of harmonized anticipatory action protocol from Bangladesh. It's the first country having worked on this harmonization process. They have one harmonized protocol for flood and one harmonized protocol for cyclone. We are currently working with the Philippine community of practice to harmonize the typhoon anticipatory action framework. And we are working with Nepal to harmonize their flood anticipatory action framework. And this harmonization, of course, needs to be done with the government partners. And Indonesia will be the next country where we will explore and document the harmonization process of anticipatory action. And in Indonesia, this process is happening through the government from the start. So there will be a lot of lessons to learn from Indonesia on this element. Philippines will be also the next country where you can get some very good example of anticipatory action framework being activated, even though the level of coordination is still a bit limited in the sense that activations took place a bit in silos during the last typhoon season, an issue that we are trying to address. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Damien, for sharing great experiences. I know in India, we have not done much on anticipatory action, but the presence of diverse stakeholders in this consultation marks the commitment that everybody is on the track and would do a lot of things. And I would say a lot of organizations have already started working on it, but maybe in different parts, separately, bilaterally, bits and pieces, not yet organized as a technical working group or maybe as a forum. But I think we will look forward to you for learning how we can organize and how we can do more in this area. Thanks for bringing the regional experiences to us. Since India is a diverse geographical terrain, we always juggle between preparing from one disaster to another disaster, from one hazard to another. Like right now, we are already thinking of how we can implement the heat wave response, and at the same time, we are preparing for the monsoons. So this is how we face the scenarios and how we work in the country. So based on that, our news panelist is Ms. Shreya Vadwan. She is the program associate at CEEW, and she will be talking more on how are the changes in the monsoon patterns impacting anticipatory action planning, and what adaptation pathways should be recommending moving forward. So over to you, Ms. Shreya.
Thank you, Imran. And first of all, thank you to Spare India and ADRA for the opportunity and having me here to present the CEW work here today. I'll just quickly share my screen. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes,
Yes,
it
yes.
is.
Thank you. So today I will be representing my organization by the name Council on Energy, Environment and Water. So before I deep dive into the presentation today, I'll just give a brief overview of the council. Yeah, I can. Yeah. So Council on Energy, Environment and Water is essentially a research policy think tank that is based in New Delhi. And we actually believe in scaling sustainable development with data integrated analysis and strategic outreach. We have recently turned 15 years old, so you can see the big 15 in our logo as well. And we have been trying to influence the policy space in India, specifically by nudging more towards democratizing data and moving towards more risk informed decision making. So, in order to achieve that, our team has been rigorously working in different parts of the country. And across the years, we have built sufficient amount of research to back why we should be moving towards more preparedness centric approach than a response centric approach. So, in 2021, we initially conducted a research piece wherein we released the Climate Vulnerability Index for India, wherein we analyzed the district level hotspots for flood, cyclones, and droughts in India. And to our stark astonishment, we found that more than 75% of Indian districts were actually exposed to some of these extreme events. And over 40% of the Indian districts were actually hotspots for all three of these extreme events. That is, they were facing floods, cyclones, and droughts simultaneously, which sort of compounded the impacts and the risks that these districts are facing in India. What we also found, and as you can see in the map, the yellow base that you can see here is essentially the amount of districts in India that are traditionally or historically more drought prone in nature or more water scarce in nature. And you can see they are accumulated more in the central and southern and western Indian belt. So states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, we all know have been traditionally more water scarce in nature, drier regions receiving less waterfall. However, in the same study, we also found, if you can see here, that 40% of the districts in India are witnessing what we call as a swapping trend. That is, they are witnessing a shift from historically being drought prone and now shifting towards more flood prone districts. And the traditional flood prone districts are now moving more towards drought prone districts. And this actually came as a surprise to us as how fast this pace of shift was happening at a district scale in India. Yeah. So then we wanted to delve deeper into understanding how the preparedness and response systems in India were functioning to combat to some of these extreme events and their impacts. So in 2023, we conducted a study assessing the preparedness of Indian states through the establishment of early warning systems in India, wherein we looked at flood early warning systems and multi-hazard early warning systems, which are majorly cyclone early warning systems in India. And the picture that we received was very stark in nature, wherein we identified that over 66% of individuals in India were exposed to floods. However, only one third of the individuals, that is only 33% of the exposed individuals, had an access to the flood early warning systems. Whereas, if you see the picture of cyclone early warning systems in India, you can see here that only the eastern and western coastal belts of the Indian country is actually exposed to cyclones and storm surges. And so essentially, around 25% of the Indian population is exposed to cyclones. However, the entire cyclone exposed population is actually covered by early warning systems, which shows that India has a very high preparedness in terms to responding to cyclones. So, to understand why we were lagging behind in terms of flood early warning systems and flood preparedness, we conducted another study in 2024, wherein we studied the variation in rainfall patterns across all the tehsils in India. And what we understood from this study was essentially the southwest monsoon rainfall has increased in over 55% of Indian tehsils. This essentially means that short lived, very heavy rainfall days were increasing in certain regions of India. These regions, as you can see very clearly in these maps, are actually situated in the western coastal belt and the southern regions of India, which are traditionally more drier in nature. This is why this is some of the reasons that is leading to that swapping pattern taking place, wherein the traditionally more drought prone regions now are witnessing very heavy rainfall events which are short lived, but like the first panelist was also mentioning, maybe receiving 200 millimeters of rainfall in a very short duration of time, which is causing these flooding and waterlogging events in these areas. Similarly, the western coast is now also witnessing a very high shift in the number and frequency of cyclones that are hitting the western coast of India. We all know that the eastern coastal belt, states like Odisha, Andhra have been traditionally more exposed to cyclones and storm surges. However, the recent news headlines clearly highlight how Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Rajasthan have now been hit by these extreme cyclone events. Now, I'd just like to take you through this a little complicated graph, but you can see here, the key to read this is essentially the blue region shows the number of tehsils which are witnessing an increase in rainfall, whereas the orange shows where is the pattern of decrease in rainfall. And you can see if we compare the Himalayan and Indo-Gangetic plain of India with the northeastern belt of India, which is one of the wettest regions in India, how starkly opposite these graphs are, wherein the northwestern belt is now witnessing a decrease in these rainfall patterns, and the Indo-Gangetic plain, while witnessing an overall decrease, is witnessing these sharp rises in very heavy rainfall instances that are taking place. Similarly, the state of Himachal Pradesh is actually witnessing both. It is receiving a reduced amount of rainfall, but also increased amount of very heavy rainfall days in a very, very short period of time, which is impacting the amount of preparedness and on-ground activities that are being conducted in these states. Now we all do these reports and do these analysis, but sometimes we lose connect with how this actually impacts the communities on ground. So this is just a screenshot of how every news article over the past 2 years had at least one headline relating to just the impacts of extreme events on the population of India. So you can see here the number of news articles that are showcasing how these extreme events have impacted the communities and the local population of India. So this actually presents a very important and a very novel case for why we need to move from a very traditional response and reactive approach to disaster management and planning to a very foresighted and preparedness centric approach to disaster planning. So what we believe at CEW in terms of anticipatory action is foresightedness, and we apply the principles of foresight into building anticipatory action and anticipatory approach at a very ground level in the states of India. So what is essentially foresight? It's a structured and systematic approach of exploring plausible futures to anticipate and better prepare for the change. I will not go into the details. The presentation can be shared with the participants today. But I will just take you through this very interesting cartoon of sorts as to how foresight can help us. It will help us actually identify what are the different scenarios that may present in front of us because of the challenges that we are facing here and now. So you can see that these two ducks are traveling here, and they can scenario one is they be completely complacent of what's lying ahead of them and actually meet the crocodile. That's scenario one for them. Or they actually strategize, plan together, and take the scenario two, that is of a lucky escape, because they can actually move on land. And they ultimately take or they may see plan too much and take scenario three, wherein they're going with the flow essentially, and may reach to a scenario that is essentially an unseen dead end, and that might also lead to their demise. So this is what foresight and anticipatory action can help us do and plan for these scenarios that may present to us in all of these future extreme event onsets. So essentially, how does foresight help in systems change? It will actually help you create the future that you can imagine today by following a five-step rule. It can actually help you identify the future consequences if you have a lack of action today. It can actually make you aware of the future pressures and shocks that you need to be aware of in order to build the resilience of your systems today. It will help you understand the desirable or undesirable future systems. It will help you create a societal understanding of desirable directions for the systemic change, because we know adaptation doesn't take place in silos. A number of stakeholders need to come together in order for a systemic level change to happen, so that action can be taken and mobilized on ground. And finally, it can enable anticipatory and adaptive policy and investment processes, because we know traditionally a lot of investments and finances in India have been focused more towards greening solutions, renewable energy solutions, or mitigation centric, because they have a very robust return on investment available. However, when we talk about adaptation related scenarios, the ROI is not as explicitly mentioned. Therefore, we sometimes struggle to mobilize finance for these actions, and maybe these foresighted scenarios and the anticipatory approach can help us trickle down and mobilize these finances on ground by visualizing what will happen to us in the future if we don't move towards that direction. Now, some of the foresight tools that can enable this whole process that CEW essentially utilizes is scoping. That is essentially mapping the ecosystem, setting the boundaries, and identifying who are the key stakeholders who will be part of this ecosystem that we want to change. It can be a sector, it can be a district, it can be a village, it can be a gram panchayat. You have to set the scope of the action that you want to take place. Then you have to map, wherein, like I showed, you can map the risks, you can map the local drivers of change, and you can also map the trends, the mega trends, the hidden trends, etc. That was also mentioned by the speakers before me, that identification of these trends and these trigger points is very important in order to explore the future scenarios. That is the next step. Then there are certain tools such as Steeple, impact matrix, and scenario development that can walk you through and visualize these scenarios for you. And then we have a backcasting system wherein you link these scenarios to all the trigger points and risks that you have identified through the mapping exercises in the previous steps, to identify what step, if goes wrong, will lead to what type of future scenario. And you need to pivot and work towards that specific point of action in your current planning and future planning. So this is just a steeple or a foresight tool in action, where you can see that we map various factors and mechanisms or trigger points across these 7 points of societal, technological, economical, environmental, political, legal, and ethical brackets, to identify what are the different things that can go wrong in our possible present or future scenarios. Then we sort of map them out in terms of rich pictures as to how does the community visualize the landscape or the ecosystem that they're living in. Then we create causal loop diagrams, that is linking these trigger points with the rich picture. So let's say you want to move towards solarization, you want to move towards enhanced early warning systems, but what are the trigger points that might stop in that feedback loop and make it turn into some other direction? That is the plus and minus identification. And then presenting all of this to government, local and state stakeholders in order to incorporate, imbibe them into their current planning processes through disaster response plans, disaster management plans, crisis management plans, etc. So the intended outcome of our foresight approach is essentially enabling anticipatory action, wherein we are looking at how adaptation can take place before the impact of climate change hit or are observed. It can identify and address the climate risks proactively before the extreme event or disaster takes place. If we know that a system is vulnerable and at risk, we can actually identify the key characteristics of the adaptation that we want to mobilize on ground through various tools and challenges that are presented below. And finally, our agenda at CEW essentially is to move from a risk to resilience centric approach, wherein risk identification is something that we have the expertise in, but resilience building is something we have to move towards in a more ecosystem and a systemic level of sorts. So in order to move from a risk estimation focused approaches towards a building approach, building resilience sort of approach, we need to incorporate all of these past, current, and future risks into our local climate adaptation plans in form of state adaptation plans, specific hazard adaptation or action plans, and engage local communities in mainstreaming these adaptation measures and finally enabling the delivery of these actions by mobilizing finance at a more local and granular level. So I will not take any further time of yours, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shreya. From your presentation, from beginning to end, I think a couple of things are quite evident, like changing climatic patterns in India have led to erratic and intense rainfall, causing more frequent and severe floods and droughts as well. The traditional monsoon cycle has been completely unpredictable now, disrupting agriculture and water security as well. So these shifts are amplifying vulnerabilities actually more, and especially among the rural and low income groups. So I think that, yeah, you picked up one important thing, which is the foresighting. I was recently reading an article in the Anticipation Hub how Bangladesh, a couple of communities in the Bangladesh did a scenario-based anticipatory, how they activated a scenario-based anticipatory action to pilot it. So I think, yeah, that kind of work also needs to happen in our country. And I can see already a lot of work is already being done by different organizations in at different levels. It just needs to be compiled in one forum. Maybe we can, and I think these workshops will help us and enable us to do this more. Thank you, Shreya, for speaking to us. I think we will take questions a little later. There are a couple of questions in the chat already, but maybe we will respond to them towards the end. So with us, we have another speaker, Dr. Shomaba Mohanty, who is an National Lead Gender Resilience and DRR at UN Women. So our question to Shomaba would be, what gender responsive strategies have shown the most promise in improving the effectiveness of anticipatory action and resilience building initiatives? So over to you, Shomaba.
Thank you so much, Imran. Pleasure to be here. Thank you to all the speakers. I kind of got really wrapped up in listening to what all of you were saying. Really exciting to be part of this conversation. Anticipatory action, preparedness, early warning are very important to UN Women. These are not areas that UN Women through our India office we have actively worked on. So this is something we are still trying to figure out how to sort of do in the Indian context compared to some of our country offices in Southeast Asia, for example, who are much more advanced in the programs that they're doing and their collaboration with different NGOs and the government. So we are still learning. We are also mapping both stakeholders and the kinds of initiatives that are out there. So this kind of conversation really helps us as much as it helps others. So I'm going to share my screen. Can I do that?
Yeah, you can do that. I think you're already the host.
Okay. Sorry. Just wait. Can anyone see my screen or?
No, we cannot.
Achha. Okay. So, okay, if I go to share. I go to share.
So you need to go to share and then choose your window that you want to share and then press the share button. There's a share button below.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick the window, but it's a desktop, right?
Yes. There will be desktops and there will be windows also below. So you can choose to share if you want to share a desktop or your windows.
Okay. Just in case can I just put I can just send one of you my presentation. I'm sorry for being such a.
Yeah.
I'm just so used to using Teams now.
So, Mama, you can send it to me. Yeah. I'll be happy to share.
Okay. Let's try doing it. sent it to Silja, but let me just try to sort of get this, understand this. It's because the Zoom app on this new laptop, so I don't have all the permissions, and so it's just creating a bit of. So I'll just wait for Silja to share.
It's fine. Yeah, we are so used to it.
Okay, but I'll just start. I think while we're waiting for Silja to share it. Would you
I
like
haven't
to go to-
received it yet.
Would you
Have
like
you
to
sent
go
it?
to the-
Ma'am, if you
Sumaba, I haven't received it yet.
I've sent it to you. I'll also share it with you on WhatsApp.
Okay, thank you.
I've just emailed it. If you want to go to sort of the next, or I can just actually start speaking without the presentation. So
Yeah, you
that's
can
okay.
start maybe. We can.
Yeah, let me do that because I don't think it's absolutely necessary. All right. So I was trying to actually wrap my brains to understand, because sort of gender responsiveness across sort of resilience building and AA is very broad topic. And of course, this sort of resilience sort of spans the entire DRR cycle. And that got me to thinking about the kinds of anticipatory action that make most sense from the perspective of women, and whether there are some aspects of anticipatory action in the way that we are thinking about it that may or may not apply, that may or may not be most useful to women. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Iljo, so much. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So the first thing is that regardless of whether this is a sort of preparedness in general or risk mitigation, there are a few things that are sort of core to gender inclusion, but also social inclusion in general. The first, and in the Indian context, I think, especially with the recent reforms that have been discussed with the relief assistance norms, I think we're moving towards this, which is instead of thinking about coverage of DRR or post or pre-disaster sort of actions, instead of thinking of the household level for coverage, start thinking of individuals for inclusion, since it is at the individual level that exclusion happens in very complex ways. Second, whether we are talking about anticipatory action, risk mitigation, or preparedness, just as with any other aspect of resilience, including climate adaptation, there needs to be, and all NGOs that are sort of present, part of today's event, do this, but just to emphasize how important it is to actually consult the groups that are at risk, and within that, the intersectionally vulnerable groups. So for example, women-headed households, even in my limited experience, are typically left out, even in non-crisis situations, out of access to a lot of social protections. Marginalized groups, so women from marginalized backgrounds within at-risk communities. So very important to consider intersectional vulnerabilities. The third, I think, is that when we are planning anticipatory action, it would be very important to sort of think about the capacity building and involvement of women in the entire sort of stages of knowledge and development leading up to the planning of anticipatory action. What I mean by that is very important to make sure women are part of technical trainings on hazards and risks, early warning systems, and interpretation of early warning systems, and what trigger thresholds mean and how they are reached. Because while women are very often and increasingly involved in planning and action when it comes to things like care responsibilities, the health of household members, children, those with special needs in the community, and so on, they continue to be left out of more technical conversations around planning, around trigger thresholds, and around early warning systems, and so on. So that's very important. The other is sort of going back to the sort of the broader issue of early warnings. we still see gaps in women being reached with early warnings at all. So, I mean, the strengthening of early warning systems has happened, but the last mile connectivity of dissemination of early warnings and interpretation of early warnings through technical capacity building continues to be a lack when it comes to women, particularly because we see that digital early warning messages are a great very quick way to reach out to people, but then given the digital access gaps in a country like India, women may not always receive the early warning messages. So these are all part of the bigger picture to consider when planning anticipatory action. And the last point is something that is perhaps India specific. We have a very, very, very large network of SHGs, whether they are government linked, government policy linked SHGs, or sort of NGO-linked women's groups who can be leveraged very, very efficiently for risk and vulnerability assessments that facilitate anticipatory action planning, outreach of early warning messages, and also identifying key risks, particularly in the economic arena for women, in order to then plan anticipatory action specifics. Next slide, please. Right. So a few specific points here. This is a diagram by UNDRR for the entire DRR sort of chain. One of the key things is when we think about lead times and when we think about sort of the timing of trigger thresholds and what triggers we are considering, it's very important to sort of allow longer lead times for women within at-risk communities. The reason is that explicitly or implicitly, women will end up undertaking a broader range of responsibilities in regards to the upcoming hazard or crisis compared to other male members in the household or in the community. So for example, you will have women typically in the household trying to make plans for children in the household, for the elderly members of the family, for persons with disabilities in their households, where you have pregnant women, for example, their reproductive health becomes a big part of the actions that they're planning. And what happens then is many other aspects of the early planning, the early actions for women or by women start getting deprioritized. So we need to start thinking about, and I'll come to that in the next slide, but we do need to start thinking about gender specific or gender responsive lead up times in an anticipatory action framework. Next slide, please. This brings me to the next specific concern that I have observed in the Indian context specifically, which is the sort of deprioritization of women's economic participation, risks, and post-disaster losses compared to sort of the other aspects of women's role within their communities and their households. In the previous slide, I mentioned that we should consider having a longer lead up time for women when we are planning the anticipatory action trigger sort of threshold timeline. And one of the reasons for that is where you have working women, where you have women working in the informal sector, where you have women working on home-based livelihoods. You will inevitably find that the actions they undertake to protect their livelihoods or assets or equipment at home, for example, will get deprioritized or pushed to the bottom of the list compared to the kinds of responsibilities they're undertaking for the children, for the families, the food, for example, rationing supplies and so on and so forth, things that are required for them also, but also required for the larger household. This is of great concern because in India, we have worked hard for many decades now to make sure that women participate in the economy, even if it is the informal economy, to make sure that women's economic empowerment is prioritized. There's been a lot of financial investments into that. And when we have this recurring cycle of crisis after crisis, we're sort of setting that back very significantly. Very small examples are, do we have enough time for them after they have resolved all of the other duties that they are doing as part of the early action, anticipatory action, to sort of evacuate their economic assets, the stocks they may have at home, the equipment they may have at home, the inputs they may have at home. Think of simple examples like women who do tailoring at home, right? Garment piece workers. The second is, let's say you have monsoon-linked floods and there is evacuation that is of potential concern. The economic assets that women may have may not be prioritized for space in limited shelters that are available for the community. So these kinds of things need to be thought about in advance. The other thing I want to flag is anticipatory action is a very specific sort of approach at a very specific time or point of the DRR cycle or the DRR chain. But especially when you think about people with intersecting vulnerabilities or intersecting gender vulnerabilities, there isn't any one point in the DRR cycle or chain where we need to intervene. We have seen recent examples from the, or not necessarily recent work that's been happening for a long time by the Mahila Housing Trust, for example, when it comes to extreme heat, where they have specifically worked with women who are working from home in slum settlements to make sure that they have access to cooling, low-cost cooling solutions so that women can continue working at home during extreme heat during summers. At the other end of that is SEVA's recent innovation around heat risk insurance, also for informal women workers who are part of their cooperative. There, it's not a risk mitigation intervention, but it is saying these losses will occur, so how can we ensure? So there need to be multiple approaches, of which anticipatory action is one when we think about the economic risks to women from monsoons and other hazards. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. In the Indian case, we have a very complex system of social protection as well as social registries. They're complex, they're overlapping, they're very broad, and they can actually be quite effectively leveraged. So how are we planning to leverage social protection systems as a DRR ecosystem in India to do anticipatory action? Because it would be sort of a useful way if we were able to link AA and social protection to actually identify beneficiaries that are vulnerable in multiple ways, where the effort to identify their vulnerabilities has already been done over many years. So, for example, using different indices of poverty, intersecting with gender, many different kinds of schemes have been created. Can we actually leverage those schemes for things like top-ups in the monsoon season or for flood AA or in other cases? We also have self-help group registries that are available with local governments, with state governments, and with different sort of line departments at the state level. Can we actually use those registries to start reaching out to SHG networks to sort of mitigate their economic risks? And of course, there are direct benefit transfer systems that have proved enormously useful for women in particular. How do we actually leverage them for AA and for providing cash assistance under AA to women as well? And the last point under this is that there has been experience by many women's groups in other countries as well, where it has proved very, very important to leverage women's groups on ground, let's say collectives or maybe even SHGs in the Indian context, to validate social registries and to validate the official databases under social protection systems, either ahead of time or on a regular sort of annual schedule, to make sure that these systems are up to date if we are linking to them for beneficiary outreach for AA or for early warnings. So I end here. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Somabha, for speaking on this very important and critical topic. Anticipatory action, I think, without women's involvement and without their participation is not possible, because already, I would say, women are already engaged, I think, in the anticipatory action and in the different roles. Like when we have early warnings in the country, all of us, including the government, organizations, everybody rely back and fall back on the frontline workers who are mostly women, and also on the SHG groups who are also again mostly women. So I think we fall back on them, but there is a need for capacity building. There is a need for trainings And also, I think I agree we should focus more also on the household level. And social protection definitely plays a key role, important role in that anticipatory action. So thank you very much for these insights. We will definitely, all of us will definitely look at it, how we can integrate these things in our responses and in our work. So our next speaker is crucial because for anticipatory action, we definitely need private partnerships, which is very important for us to move forward on this. So we have Mr. Marshall Kumar, who is manager at ICL Foundation, who will be from whom we will be wanting to understand how can strategic investment and multi-stakeholder collaborations help scale up anticipatory action in disaster preparedness. So thank you, Mr. Marshall, for joining us, and over to you. You are on mute, Mr. Marshall. Can't hear you.
Yeah, some restriction with my laptop, but anyway, am I audible now?
Yes,
I
yes,
hope you
yes.
can able to see me as well. Yeah, thank you. It is wonderful opportunity again. Take a kind of time to discuss with the extremely wonderful panel here. I mean, they were briefing extensively um, about different various aspect of AA. Man, it's just amazing to know about the previous and their experience of working here, and then definitely bringing a thematic level, sector level, kind of highlights. Really interesting to know, and thank you so much for bringing this wonderful panel here today. And I'm glad that I'm also be part of this and to take you through some of our very pertinent and our experience as a kind of corporate foundation, as CSR and its key role it plays since a decade in India, and the first country to take it forward. Such kind of very important action on various aspects, and definitely where disasters also take an important place in it. So coming to thank you, Iman, for this opportunity, because you're asking for a very important question of how investment makes a whole lot of difference, and then having a multi-stakeholder approach is also key with respect to anticipatory action and any kind of disaster or pre or post disaster, particularly in disaster preparedness. So we at HCL Foundation strongly taken this effort since our intervention since 2011 through various stakeholder engagement, and in fact it started from the in-house kind of effort. The way before CSR formed its shape, and we started kind of mobilize our resources internally and take it forward to how it make it more sustainable. I mean, from the different kind of intervention operations. So, taking from that experience, we have shaped up kind of very strategically looking at how we can place a disaster as a cross-cutting and important initiatives of a SEAL Foundation or any of the CSRs, that we can create a kind of source code model which can be replicated in different other interventions. So we see anticipatory action working in different thematics and programs, and making it a kind of integrated approach rather working on a very kind of separated or sector based. So rather we were really focused on very strategically on urban, rural, and then take it to more of a cross sectional investment. So DRRs fits into every other sector, make it a more of robust and integrated approach. It's important in our any of the efforts. So if I say HCL and its kind of region or locations, we pretty go to the locales and then kind of take it a more of bottom up approach. For example, we work under Uday, a flagship program of HCL Foundation, where we identify urban slums and more marginalized community having more vulnerable, right, and we identify them and make it ensure that we bring all the sectors to come together and make sure that there is a multi-sector approach is there, and make it a kind of integrated, and ensure that there is a kind of life cycle approach is also built in where we invest more of investment very strategically, and we have seen it a very interesting kind of reports or kind of results which really talks about how it is bringing a lot of results. And definitely there is a return of investment in terms of social or economic, any of the indicators if you can work on it. So bringing disaster lens and at different level right in a life cycle approach is a key where we identified it is very important to bring the right stakeholder right time, so that we work on a convergence and collaborated approach. So we strongly believe how we can bring different stakeholders, the right stakeholders at the right time to effectively involve in disaster. For example, we kind of working with government sectors to help the state emergency operation control room or SEOC, or if you bring in, for example, if the academy which is right now hosting is also a joint effort since 2020. We were bringing the right stakeholders and create a awareness, and this platform create an immense result and opportunity for different other stakeholders to strengthen the kind of network of disasters and different other stakeholders or sectors. So we strongly invest on kind of a multi-stakeholder approach and work on a convergence model which enable kind of different outputs at the different times. So if it is with respect to the monsoon or pre-monsoon or post-disaster need assessment, we bring in the experts and to do the kind of strengthen the IAGs or ISCs and different other coordination, ensure that the team get the right result, or in fact effort or action taken right from immediate to any kind of disaster relief. So going with this approach and bringing the sustainability and different other stakeholders nationally and internationally, our experiences, we clearly identify that it should be a cross-cutting, it should be very strategical investment basis on the local need, and which has to come from the bottom-up approach, and bringing the right stakeholders at the right time for any kind of inbuilt in all actions. In fact, it is very important and pertinent. I think this model is also being taken forward to different kind of opportunities and in different of the programs, and we see that as got a lot of result into it. So for effort, for example, working on the bringing the multi-sectoral reports is also very important, like on any kind of emergency response, which is also with helping the Spare India or any of the kind of global network organizations, or bringing the NDMA and SDMA or any of the state vehicles or national vehicles to respond immediately through emergency coordinations, or bringing a kind of larger area of bringing all the stakeholders on one single platform to create a larger awareness in terms of effective knowledge management or capacity building, like Spare India or through a Spare network, or through, in fact, the academy platform. These are the key areas we really worked for a decade, and you could able to see some of the reports have been also published at a global level, that this is important strategical investment on humanitarians. So we are working on still on the humanitarian logistics or kind of dashboards is very important, which brings the kind of affirmative actions in place. In fact, it is an action, not a kind of policies or a kind of a partnership. It's just on papers rather on field. So this is how we bring in kind of resilient building activities and community engagement. And if it is a kind of early response or early warning system, we ensure that community plays in central part of it, and then bring in all the stakeholders to take care the community need. That's the key investment or a kind of approach we take it forward internally, and it is also kind of important in CSR or any of the kind of funding financial which is already available every year, nationally. So I think the team here or participants who really interested to work with the corporate social responsibilities, definitely that there is an opportunity where you can bring in more of strategical, and in fact more of kind of, it is important that bringing the right stakeholders, it should be a network based model which can bring in more of kind of results, and making the community as a center in it, to it. And definitely there is a opportunity and long way to work to bring in kind of monsoon preparedness or any of the disaster related interventions. So with that, I think I would like to stop here. Just an overview of how HCL works with flagship programs and bring in DRR at a cross sectional into it, and then bringing kind of DRR lens and capacity our partners and the community is very important. We see it here, and sure it is can be taken to different other kind of corporates or any of the institutions which can take it up forward. So that's the idea and experience we would like to share it today to the audience here. I'll be happy to respond to you if you have any questions or maybe
Thanks a
comment.
lot, Marshall, for speaking on. Yeah, thanks a lot, Marshall, for speaking on how integrated approach with multi-sectoral integration is important for cross-sectional investments, and how this can help in strategic investments based on the community needs, and how this can help in building on the anticipatory action measures. Thank you very much. So when we talk about integrated approach and multi-stakeholder approach, I think we will not be able to talk on this concept, on this topic, without including the persons with special needs. So we have another speaker with us, next panelist with us, Mr. Javed Amatak, who is the founder of Humanity Welfare Organization, who will be throwing light on how inclusive strategies work best to ensure equitable monsoon preparedness, especially for persons with special needs. Over to you, Mr. Javed Amatak.
Thank you, Imran Saab. You had a nice deliberations today on the disasters and monsoon disaster preparedness programs. We are very happy to talk on the issues that are now giving us a lot of challenges to live a peaceful life. We have seen a lot of disasters have already created a huge havoc throughout the world. Somewhere it is the forest fire, somewhere it is the floods, somewhere it is the landsliding, and people are suffering a lot. But we have to be very cautious for the future generations, how we can have the mitigation of various disasters that may create extra disabilities and may make the people homeless or uh, take away their shelters. Uh, I will present a small presentation on uh, the inclusive approach for mitigating the uh, disasters. Uh, when we see the disasters happen, every life is very important for us to save it. And same is the case with the person with disabilities who, despite having body challenges, are the part of the society and needs to have been included in every sort of our processes that are for the protection, that are for the uh, uh, other issues like saving the lives. When we see the person with disabilities, they also face huge mobility challenges. They have a lot of body challenges that segregate them from the common societies. When we see the uh, disasters, exclusion of person with disabilities happen because there are the alerts that are not accessible for every type of person with disability. Evacuation challenges come because even the rescuers don't know how to evacuate all the persons they do their efforts, but sometimes the lot of humans remain behind because of the body challenges, because of certain issues that they are not responding at their own. They are dependent on others. So there are a lot of risks where people get segregated and falling prey to the disasters, and sometimes the deaths occur, and the most vulnerable section are the person with disabilities. When we design the disaster mitigation programs, it is very important we should be very inclusive. We should have preparedness programs that can save all the lives, that can think of all the persons. There are a lot of sensitivities that we have to be aware about. We have women with disabilities, we have person having the blindness or the difficulties in vision or visual disabilities. We have the people with mobility disorders, or people who have restricted mobility or have no limbs to walk or run. We have the people with disabilities who are having different uh, challenges to overcome during the disasters, or while living in the general life in the society. They don't have uh, the sensitivity about the different environments. Like when floods are there, they are having the phobia of water. They are very uh, mm, sad about the changes in situations because of their intellectual capabilities. They don't know how to show resilience with the changing environments. Same is the case with the uh, people who live in far-flung areas and face different types of disabilities, who are never been to school, who don't have the mm, access to the schools and other information points. Thus, they don't have exposure to every sort of environment. Um, when the disasters come, there are certain challenges that everyone is facing, that is inaccessible warning system, no sign language interpretation is available. Thus, people having the hearing speech disabilities, they don't know where to go, what to do, what is going on. They are very lacking the information. There are no visual alerts where such person can see and they can recognize what is happening all around. When they see the people are running or trying to save themselves, but no one is giving them the information. Thus, they are completely segregated. The people having the lesser mobility, although they can cry, they know everything, but they are not in a position to get evacuated at the right time. There arises the huge communication barrier with the first responders. They don't know how to uh, go for a help, or where to approach and whom to approach, and in which way they can approach. There is a very minute concept of accessibility. Inaccessible shelters and other facilities are there, even though people are rescued, but thereafter they are in the kind of situations where they are not reasonably accommodated. uh, so we need to have a good mechanism when disasters happen, because nowadays we see that uh, every sort of disaster is happening in every sort of environment, or in every country or state. We see the disasters are happening. So we should have some systems in place, that there should be a multimodal alerts, audio, visual, tactile, uh, and vibration type of signals. Sign language on TV and emergency broadcasts is needed, is the need of the hour, so that a person having the hearing speech disabilities, they too can know what is happening, and they can go with the alerts. Mobile apps with assistive features, text to speech screen readers should be introduced, so that person with visual disabilities also know that disasters are going to happen, and they can think of the rescue. They can uh, uh, contact with the people who, or they, if they have some caregivers, they can ask them that let we plan the rescue. Trained community volunteers for door-to-door alerts should be available, because we have the scattered population of persons with disabilities. If we have the door-to-door facility for the alerts, everyone can be included. Inclusive risk mapping and data use. Uh, we should involve a person with disabilities while doing the mapping, and we should have a database that can be available in every risky area where the floods, where the disasters happen occasionally. Uh, um, we can have the mobile apps, GPRS system, through which we can collect the data that where person with disabilities are located. The maps should be used to plan the accessible evacuation routes and shelter points. If we do such type of mapping, we can plan the evacuation in a very accessible way, and everyone will be saved despite their body challenges. We can have the targeted alerts, ensure that early warning systems are designed to reach every vulnerable population. This could involve using local radio stations, SMS, or phone messaging, or community loudspeakers. In addition to more modern technologies should be used to ensure that everyone of us is included and not excluded. Community-based monitoring is very important. We should encourage the communities to engage in local monitoring of weather and environmental conditions so that they can provide early warnings to each other and enhance the effectiveness of national level warnings. Capacity building is very important, and we should have a trained manpower, because sometimes the people who are going to in rescue teams, they don't know how to handle the person with disabilities, how to handle a wheelchair user, how to handle a crutch user, how to um, uh, give support to a woman with disability. They fell prey to the disasters, even when the rescue teams are there, but they are having lack of trainings, lack of capacity. Uh, mm, we should organize the mock drills that should be very inclusive in nature, and disaster preparedness programs can help us to include those person with disabilities who can give them training about their needs and about the way they could be dealt in during the emergency situations. The training during the emergency situations on disability awareness and support should be framed so that in every program there is a special program for person with disabilities. Manuals and SOPs on inclusive response should be created so that awareness raising happens in advance, because everything happens in the right way when we plan it. Uh, Planning in case of the disability is very important, because when we give the names to person with disabilities, we call them person with special needs, person with abilities, but implementing in on ground is very important. When we say someone that you are a person with special needs, that means that those special needs we have to cater on time, we have to plan in advance, then only we can include him, we can give him a safe passage during the rescue operations or the disasters. We should initiate the awareness programs targeting the marginalized and vulnerable groups to equip them with the knowledge of skill needed to prepare for the monsoons. When we see the rescue teams come, although they might have some trainings, but when the person with disabilities going to they are not supporting, they are not cooperating, that may create a kind of barrier between the two rescuer and the person who is to be rescued. So both the sections should be trained well. so that they can cooperate each other during the disasters. They can include the evacuation drills, first aid courses, climate change education. When person with disabilities and those who are the volunteers for the rescue, they both will get these sort of education and training. The rescue operations will happen well, and everyone will be very safe. Training the local leaders from the marginalized groups can be trained during the disaster management or by the experts who are very much known to the disaster management. These leaders are trusted within their communities and can help to disseminate critical information during times of crisis. There are a lot of influencers in the community which we can include, and we can give them trainings, we can aware them, and in turn they can aware the communities. They can have effective role while addressing to the community. And after rescue, we have other sort of challenges. We don't have the accessible infrastructure after rescuing a person with disability, taking him to a shelter. The shelter is not sometimes accessible. There is a lot of privacy breach. Some person with disabilities have high support needs. They want to have the change of diapers, urine bags, catheters. They want to go to the accessible toilets, but such things are not available. And the person who is rescued thinks that it was better not to be rescued because his uh, mm, mm, there are a lot of challenges which he face during because of the privacy breach. He feels that his dignity is in a great threat. For safe evacuation, the transport should be designed accessible for wheelchair users and those having the severe disabilities. Even the while transporting the person with disabilities, they face lot of difficulties. They are taken away from the wheelchairs. They are not given the crutches. Sometimes the aids and appliances get lost. Someone's hearing aid is not working during the rains, or it gets out of the charge. So after uh, safe passage, giving them the safe passage or a rescue, the person with disability should get all such aids and appliances, accessible infrastructure, so that they could uh, maintain the dignity. Availability of assistive devices at the relief point should be mandated, so that the person with disabilities in need of such devices don't suffer. If they suffer, then the dignity is lost. Then the person with disabilities get uneasiness. They are not in comfort zones. uh, Policy and institutional strengthening. In order to mainstream disability inclusion in the national, local disaster policy should be designed to protect the person with disabilities from facing the barriers. There are a lot of barriers, but when the institutions are very strong, the policies are strong, uh, uh, good policies are framed, then the inclusion is maintained. In every district and sub-district, we should establish disability focal points in the disaster committees who have knowledge and training about the disaster mitigation. Sometimes we have the national disaster program, we have the state disaster program, but we don't have the focal points at the district level, at the taluka level, sub-district level. But these committees should be there, so that inclusion happens during the disasters, and there is well knowledge among the committees which are framed for the disaster management. The disaster department should partner with the disabled persons organization to frame the inclusive disaster rescue and rehabilitation plans. It is very important that the disaster departments should know where the person with disabilities are, where the organizations working for such disasters or inclusion are. They should have a close collaboration, so that during the disasters, everything goes in a very inclusive way. Community engagement and empowerment. We should have awareness campaigns using the universal design, and it should be organized at all levels in the district, sub-district, tehsil and zonal level, so that challenges don't arise at all. The need of the hour is to empower the person with disabilities, local leaders, peer educators in preparedness of the disaster management programs. The disability sector working model is nothing about us without us, and it works a lot. If we give the shape to the management, to the disaster management, and give uh, a kind of connection between the person with disabilities, the organizations working on the disabilities. If we uh, include them in planning, in procedures of disaster management, we will find that very much effectiveness and inclusion will be sought. The call for call to action is that we should prioritize inclusive system in monsoon preparedness plans. We should invest in accessible communication infrastructure and data. Nothing about us without us should be accepted, and person with disability should be included. Local knowledge should be much valued, because a lot of traditional knowledge also help us during the disasters to rescue in the rescue operations, and engaging the community leaders, including those from marginalized groups, disability sector. It will definitely improve the local resilience. Participatory planning is very important, that we have already told that if meetings happen, if planning happen, person with disability should be included in such consultations. And in the during the disasters, we have seen a lot of best practices. We have seen in Nepal, emergency responders are trained to understand the needs of person with disability during the monsoons. They are taught how to evacuate uh, people with mobility challenges. Now we have seen in Japan, Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. Local authorities in Japan started creating evacuation of persons with disabilities. They had a detailed plans about the needs of person with disabilities, and they uh, mm, created centers with assistive technology, mobility, medical needs, and shared the information with the community leaders ahead of the disasters. Inclusion of disability advocacy group in Thailand. Thailand government collaborates with local organizations that represent persons with disabilities to ensure that their specific needs are included in the national disaster preparedness plans. These groups help to design, implement inclusive, community-based disaster risk management strategies. Accessible transport services in Sri Lanka. During the monsoon, Sri Lanka sets up accessible transport network with buses that are equipped to handle the persons having mobility challenges. These buses have ramps, space for wheelchairs, ensuring evacuations plan could be carried out for all. Partnership with NGOs in Maldives. Organizations such as Maldives Disabled Persons Organization work closely with the local disaster management authorities to ensure that relief and evacuation efforts are inclusive. For example, MDPA helps us to distribute relief package that are adapted for persons with disabilities. Even sometimes we have cerebral palsy children, we have the children with other mental or intellectual disabilities that do not eat the general food. They have some specific food needs. Maldives NGOs prepare those foods and provide to such person with disabilities. The Disability Rights Act in India, Indian government has enacted the Rights of Person with Disabilities Act, which mandates inclusive practice in disasters, preparedness and response. The law requires disaster management policies to account for the needs of persons with disabilities, ensuring that their voices are also represented while planning and responding the strategies. Uh, uh, I hope that you have got a kind of knowledge how we can include person with disabilities, how we can have inclusive approach during the disasters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Javed, for speaking on this very critical and important aspect of how inclusion is not just a lip service, but also something to act on and include in all of in the disaster management planning, anticipatory action planning, and even the response planning as well. How especially on how it's critical to not just include person with special needs, but also train the first responders on how to manage the person with special needs at a time of need. So thank you very much for this discussion. So for this, for throwing light on this critical topic and important aspect of the humanitarian context. So with this, we have concluded this panel discussion from all the speakers and panelists. We are slightly over time by 15 minutes. There were some questions in the chat box. I think some of them are already addressed. A couple of them are there. But if I would, we don't have a time to take questions now, but I will still open it for a couple of remarks or comments maybe, or maybe questions from panelists. But otherwise, the questions that those are not addressed yet, we will definitely get answers from different panelists on that and share it with all of you. But let's take maybe a couple of minutes to hear any questions or comments from anyone on this. Yeah, Hina, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all the panelists for providing us very excellent insights into this topic. And thanks to ADRA and Spare India for initiating this exercise, a long called for, exercise. So based on the different points and suggestions and submissions made by different panelists, we feel that there's a need for strengthening the coordination around this particular area, because for India, we have still to kind of, achieve a lot of milestones in order for us to institute a more organized mechanism for putting this anticipatory action into, action. So I have put out certain some of my own submissions in the chat box, and starting from some of the things that are being spelled out by the panelists itself. But yes, the way we do a URS protocol for emergencies, we need to establish hazard specific protocols and SOPs on anticipatory action. There are a lot of documents globally available. We as CA have been instituting anticipatory action in several countries across the globe, including Bangladesh, Kenya, Africa, some other countries, and would be happy to provide any support around this. We also tried to test some of the assumptions. We also know that SEEDS also developed some tools and protocols last year, but there's a greater need of now synergizing these efforts and having a dedicated working group on anticipatory action who can finalize these tools with technical agencies. We had Shreya talking about deep diving into the technicalities of this, and I'm sure there are other technical agencies who could also provide more support. One very important thing is on forecast based financing. How do we strengthen our policy recommendations on national social protection programs integrating into forecast based financing? Now this is a piece of work that we'll have to take up with the government at different layers, and maybe pilot test one or two of these. These are coming from our learnings from Bangladesh on how they instituted such mechanisms. We also need to have a very positive engagement with the UN agencies, because as had been spelled out by some of the panelists, especially by Damien, so it's more about their their commitment for pool funding and resource allocations for the anticipatory actions, whether it's IFRC, whether it's the FAO, WFP, UN agencies, CSRs, on their role on potential resource allocations. These are some of my submissions. I would stop here. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hina, for bringing up this critical submissions with critical points that we need to take up as a collective sector. Like we need to come up as a collective together to work on this and take this forward. So I think we need to conduct such kind of workshops or maybe a smaller group meetings, consultations, wherein we can jot down or plan how we can work on this together. So yeah, we will maybe talk bilaterally on this and take us forward. Thank you again. Do we have any other comments or submissions? I think otherwise we can take it to the next part, which is vote of thanks, which will be done by Sphere India. But I would also like to thank all the panelists and all the participants from our side for joining this important workshop and spending this 1.5 hour time with 15 minutes overtime. Thank you very much. Over to you, for colleagues from Sphere India, for the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for joining us today this insightful session. And we will have more webinars on discussion on this topic and many other related topics. If you have any suggestion or feedback, please feel write to us. And stay tuned our social media channel for regular updates from Spare India Academy. And thank you, Madhu sir. And thank you, panelists.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, sir.